Theo Whitfield was 38 years old when he gave up his engineering career to care for his paralyzed wife. For 3 years, he lifted her from bed, fed her, bathed her, never once complaining, never asking for anything in return. He believed it was what love looked like. That Tuesday evening, he came home early from the pharmacy and heard her voice through the hallway, light and laughing on speakerphone with her sister. He stopped to listen, expecting to hear his name spoken with gratitude. Instead, he heard her say, "He's basically my servant at this point. He doesn't even ask anymore. He just does it." Standing there, medication bag still in his hand, Theo said nothing. He didn't storm in. He didn't confront her. He simply stood in that hallway, absorbing every word, while she kept laughing, completely unaware she'd just been overheard. What he did next would unravel far more than she ever imagined. But it started with this one silent decision in the hallway. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 6. Theo Whitfield didn't hit snooze. He never did. He sat up in the dark, rubbed his face with both hands, and got to his feet before the second buzz. That was 3 years of muscle memory right there. 3 years of mornings that looked exactly like the one before. He moved quietly through the hallway, past the framed photos of places they used to travel together. Barcelona, Lisbon, a blurry one from a ferry somewhere near Oslo. He didn't look at them anymore. Not really. He just walked past them the way you walk past furniture. The medical bed was in what used to be the dining room. They'd converted it after Adrienne came home from the hospital. Theo had done most of the work himself, measuring doorways, removing the old table, calculating the clearance for the wheelchair. Old habits. He'd been a structural engineer for 11 years before the accident. Now he was this. He pushed open the door softly. Adrienne was awake. She usually was by now, lying on her back, staring at the ceiling with an expression that had once looked like sadness, but lately just looked like impatience. "Morning," Theo said. She didn't look at him. "My neck is stiff again. I'll adjust the pillow after I get you up." He went through the motions the way a surgeon works. Sure hands, no wasted movement. He locked the bed rails, slid one arm beneath her shoulders and one under her knees, and lifted. She was lighter than she'd been 3 years ago. That worried him sometimes. He carried her to the wheelchair, settled her in, checked the footrests, adjusted her position until she was sitting straight. "Too far left," she said. He shifted her. "Better?" She didn't answer. She was already reaching for her phone. Breakfast was scrambled eggs, lightly salted, with a glass of orange juice, and her morning medications lined up on a small ceramic dish. The blue one she'd asked for, because the white dish looked clinical. He'd driven to 3 different stores to find the blue one. He set it in front of her, and she typed something on her phone without looking up. "Felix is coming at 10, she said. "I know. I put it in the calendar. He might stay for lunch. Can you make sure there's something for 2? Theo looked at her for a moment. Then he turned back to the stove. "Sure." Naomi Hicks arrived just before 9, the way she always did. Without knocking, using the key Adrienne had given her the week she came home from rehab. She was tall like Adrienne, but harder in the face, with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Morning, Theo." She said it the way you say, "out of my way." She sat down at the kitchen table and opened her laptop. The Settlement Trust. Always the Settlement Trust. Adrienne's accident had resulted in a substantial payout from the other driver's insurance, enough to cover years of care, lost income, medical equipment. Naomi had offered to manage it. Adrienne had agreed. Theo had signed the paperwork without reading all of it, because that was the first month, and everything was chaos, and he trusted family. He didn't know yet how much that signature would cost him. "I'm moving some funds into the therapy account," Naomi said, not looking up. to cover Felix's expanded session. "We're expanding sessions?" Theo asked. "Adrian and I discussed it. I'd like to be part of those conversations." Naomi smiled without warmth. "It's a medical decision, Theo. You don't need to worry about the complicated parts. Just focus on what you do." She said it gently. She always said things gently. That was the worst part. Felix Granger showed up at 10 sharp, gym bag over one shoulder, a wide smile already in place. He shook Theo's hand with the easy confidence of a man who had never once doubted his welcome anywhere. "How's she doing this week?" he asked. "About the same," Theo said. "Good, good. I've got some new exercises I want to try." He was already moving toward Adrienne's room like he knew the house better than Theo did. Maybe he did. Theo stood in the kitchen doorway and watched him go. The session ran 90 minutes. Then it ran 2 hours. Theo could hear them talking and laughing behind the closed door. Low voices, easy laughter. The kind that comes from people who are comfortable with each other in a way that had nothing to do with therapy. Felix left at noon. He touched Adrienne's shoulder on his way out. A small thing, just a touch. But Theo noticed, the way he always noticed small structural things, the hairline crack in a wall, the bolt that was a quarter turn too loose. He filed it away. There were other things he had filed away too, little things that hadn't added up. The way Adrienne startled, actually flinched, when he came into a room without warning. The calls she ended too fast, her voice switching registers mid-sentence. The phone she tilted away from him with a practiced, casual movement that wasn't casual at all. Small things. The kind of things you explain away when you love someone. Theo was starting to stop explaining them away. That evening, he drove to the pharmacy to pick up Adrienne's monthly prescription refill. He was back in 40 minutes, a little sooner than expected. The front door was unlocked. He stepped inside quietly, not sneaking, just tired, just moving on autopilot, and stopped when he heard her voice coming from down the hall. She was on speakerphone. Her bedroom door was halfway open. He heard Naomi's voice first, tinny through the speaker, saying something he couldn't quite make out. Then Adrienne laughed. It wasn't the polite, careful laugh she used around him. It was loose and real and easy. And then, in that bright, unbothered voice, she said, "He's basically my servant at this point. He doesn't even ask anymore, he just does it." Theo stood in the hallway. The pharmacy bag was in his hand. The pills inside it rattled faintly when his grip tightened. He didn't move. He didn't make a sound. He just stood there in the dim hallway, while the words settled over him like dust after a building comes down. Slow, quiet, and covering everything. Then he took one careful step back, and another, and he slipped back out the front door without a sound. He sat in the car for a long time. The engine was off. The pharmacy bag was on the passenger seat. The neighborhood was quiet, just the sound of a dog barking 2 streets over and the low hum of someone's sprinklers cutting on in the dark. Theo didn't cry. He didn't punch the steering wheel. He didn't do any of the things a person in a movie might do in this moment. He just sat there with both hands in his lap and let himself feel the full weight of it. He's basically my servant at this point. He turned the words over in his mind the way he used to turn over a bad set of blueprints, looking for the exact place where everything had gone wrong. Not the moment she said it. That was just when he'd found out. The wrongness had started somewhere else, somewhere earlier. He just hadn't seen it yet. He sat in that car for 11 minutes. He knew because he watched the clock on the dashboard the whole time. A habit from years of managing project timelines. Then he picked up the pharmacy bag, got out of the car, and walked back inside. Adrienne was in bed, phone face down on the blanket, the room dim. She looked up when he came in. "You were gone a while," she said. "Pharmacy was backed up," he said. He set her medication on the nightstand, filled her water glass from the bathroom tap, and said goodnight. She was asleep before he left the room. He didn't confront her. He had decided that in the car, and he didn't change his mind. Anger was a sledgehammer. Theo had always preferred precision tools. So instead, over the following days, he stopped. Not everything. Not in any way she could point to and call neglect. He stopped the invisible work. The 100 small things he did without being asked. The things she had clearly stopped seeing as kindness and started seeing as function. He no longer cut her food into smaller pieces before bringing her plate. He no longer went into her room in the morning to crack the blinds before she woke up, the way he'd done for 2.5 years, because she once said she hated opening her eyes to a dark room. He no longer reminded her when her afternoon medication was due. He waited. She had to ask for the blinds now. She had to ask him to cut the chicken. She had to notice the time herself. The first morning, she looked at her breakfast plate, and then looked at him, clearly waiting for something to happen. When nothing did, she picked up her fork and cut the eggs herself, slowly, with the awkward grip that came from not having tried it in a long time. She didn't say anything. He thought she might. He was almost ready for a fight, but she just ate her breakfast, and afterward she told Naomi on the phone that Theo seemed off and that she thought he might be getting burnt out. She thought he was tired. That was fine. Let her think that. He started watching her more carefully, not in an obvious way. He kept his face neutral, his movements routine, but his eyes were doing something different now. 3 years of looking at Adrienne and seeing his wife, and now he was looking at her the way he used to look at a structure he'd been called in to assess. Systematic, patient, looking for what didn't match, and things didn't match. He remembered something from about 6 months ago. He'd been in the doorway of her room folding a towel, half watching, not really paying attention, when she'd shifted in the medical bed and, just for a second, braced her hand against the steel bed frame and pulled herself upright. Not all the way, not dramatically, but the motion had come from her core and her arms both, and she'd held it for 2, maybe 3 seconds before going limp and settling back against the pillow. At the time, he'd thought it was a reflex, a remnant. Doctors had told him in the early months that the nervous system sometimes fired old signals, that movement didn't always mean what it looked like. He had accepted that, filed it away under things I don't understand, and moved on. He didn't accept it anymore. Now, every time he helped her transfer from the bed to the chair, he paid attention. Not to her face. She was always watching his face, but to her hands, her core, the small adjustments her body made, the way her left hand pressed down on the mattress edge in a way that looked steadying, the way her torso tensed a half-second before he lifted, like she was bracing. Small things, the kind of things a person notices only when they stop explaining them away. He kept his expression the same, careful, steady, kind. And he said nothing. Thursday night, he was gathering laundry from the couch. Adrienne had taken to leaving blankets and small things piled on the cushions since it was close to her medical bed. When his hand closed around something hard beneath the second cushion, he thought it was the TV remote, which had been missing for 2 days. He pulled it out. It wasn't the remote. It was a phone. Slim, black, in a dark case he didn't recognize. Not Adrienne's regular phone. She kept that one in a white case with her initials on the back. This one had no case markings at all. Theo turned it over in his hand once, slowly. Then he set the laundry basket down and sat on the edge of the couch. Theo sat with the phone in his hand and didn't move for a long time. From down the hall, he could hear the low murmur of Adrienne's television. Some home renovation show she'd been watching all week, the kind with cheerful hosts and predictable endings. The sound of it felt strange now, like a soundtrack from another world. He set the phone on the cushion beside him and finished gathering the laundry. He carried the basket to the washing machine, loaded it, started the cycle. He went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, and stood at the sink, drinking it slowly, while the machine hummed behind the utility room door. Then he walked back to the living room, picked up the phone, and slipped it into his pocket. He waited until she was asleep. That took about 40 minutes. He checked on her twice, once to bring her evening medication, which she asked for with the same flat, distracted tone she'd used all week, and once to collect the dinner tray she'd left balanced on the arm of her chair. Both times, she barely looked at him. Both times he smiled and asked if she needed anything else. Both times, she said no. He watched the light under her door until it went dark. Then he waited another 15 minutes just to be sure, sitting at the kitchen table with his water glass and the kind of patience he used to need when waiting on city permits. Then he took out the phone. The screen lit up with a 4-digit passcode prompt. He looked at it for a moment. Then he typed in 28124, the month and year of their wedding anniversary. It opened. He found the messages almost immediately. The contact was saved simply as FGPT, Physical Therapist, Felix Granger. The most recent message was from 2 days ago. He started at the beginning of the thread and worked forward, methodically, the way he would read through a contractor's report, not skimming, not jumping ahead, just taking it line by line, absorbing each piece before moving to the next. The thread went back 14 months. He read for a long time. There were things in those messages that hit him like a door swinging open in the dark, sudden and hard and impossible to step back from. The casual intimacy of it, the pet names, the logistics worked out around his own schedule, after Theo leaves for groceries appearing in one message, dated last October as simply and practically as a calendar note. He had gone to the store that afternoon. He remembered it because it had been raining, and he'd forgotten to bring the reusable bags, and Adrienne had made a comment about it when he got back. He remembered that. He kept reading. Near the bottom of the thread, there were messages about money. Careful language. The kind people used when they knew they were writing something they shouldn't. Once the settlement clears, appeared twice in Felix's messages. Adrienne's replies were short, but clear. Not yet. Soon. He doesn't suspect anything. Theo looked at that last line for a long moment. He doesn't suspect anything. He photographed every screen. Slowly and deliberately, his own phone held steady over Adrienne's, making sure each frame was clear, each timestamp visible. His hands didn't shake. He had expected them to. They didn't. When he reached the end of the thread, he went through the rest of the phone. No other significant messages. A few deleted items he couldn't recover without tools he didn't have tonight. A brief call log that showed Felix's number coming up twice, on days Theo could already place from memory. He photographed the call log, too. Then he turned the phone over, checked the case, confirmed he hadn't left any marks on it, and walked back to the living room. He knelt beside the couch, lifted the second cushion exactly as far as he had before, placed the phone back in the same position, face down, same angle, and lowered the cushion over it. He stayed crouched there for a moment. If he woke her up now, she would cry. She would explain. She would find a way to make this about her. Her injury, her pain, his absence even when he was standing right there. She was very good at that. He had watched her do it with nurses, with Naomi, with the insurance adjusters who came to the house in the first year, all of them leaving convinced they had failed her somehow. If he moved now, he would only have a phone he'd handled without a witness. She would destroy it, or deny it, or tell Naomi, and Naomi would spend 3 days making sure Theo looked like the unstable one. He needed the full picture first. Every wall load-bearing, every connection documented. He stood up and went to the kitchen. He sat at the table, opened his phone, and navigated to a notes app he'd never used before. He enabled the lock on it with a new passcode, one that had nothing to do with Adrienne. Then he created a new note. At the top, he typed the date. Below it, he wrote 2 words, Day 1. Then he began to write. He wrote for 23 minutes, Precise, clear, factual. No emotion. Just what he had found, what he had seen, what he had photographed, and when. When he was done, he locked the note, set down his phone, and turned off the kitchen light. He walked to the bedroom. He got into bed. He lay down beside his wife in the dark, and he closed his eyes. He was up before her alarm. That part hadn't changed. 3 years of early mornings had trained his body like a clock. Eyes open at 6:15, no matter what. He lay still for a moment in the gray light, listening to Adrienne breathe beside him, and then he got up, moved to the bathroom, and washed his face with cold water. He looked at himself in the mirror for a few seconds. Then he went to make breakfast. The routine ran the same as always. Oatmeal with sliced banana, the way she liked it. Her morning medications laid out on the small tray. The orange bottles arranged in the order she took them, tallest to shortest, which was something he had started doing in year 1 and never stopped. He filled her water glass. He set a folded hand towel beside the tray. When her alarm went off at 7, he was already in the doorway. "Morning," he said. She blinked at him with the slow, unfocused look she always had before she was fully awake. "What time is it?" "7. Your oatmeal's ready." "Okay." She reached for her phone, her regular phone, on the nightstand, and scrolled through it while he began the transfer. Arm under her shoulders, slow pivot. Her weight settled into the wheelchair, and he locked the brakes the way he always did, then stepped back. She was already reading something on her phone. She didn't say thank you. She almost never did anymore. He had stopped tracking when that changed. He went back to the kitchen and poured himself a cup of coffee. He drank it standing at the counter, facing the window. The yard was damp from last night's rain. A pair of birds were working through the grass near the fence line, pulling at something he couldn't see. He watched them and kept his face very still. There was a pharmacy run that afternoon. That was normal. He went twice a week on average, more when they had refills stacking up. He told Adrienne he'd be gone 40 minutes, and she waved her hand toward the door without looking up from the television. He sat in the pharmacy parking lot after picking up the prescriptions and opened the bank app on his phone. He hadn't opened it in a while. Naomi managed the settlement trust directly. That had been the arrangement since the beginning, set up when Adrienne was still in the hospital and Theo was too worn down to push back. The trust was in both their names, technically, but in practice, Naomi paid the bills, managed the disbursements, and gave Theo a monthly summary in a spreadsheet she emailed without fail every first of the month, always neatly formatted, always brief. He had never questioned it. He had been busy. He scrolled through the account activity now, going back 90 days. The regular withdrawals were there: pharmacy, her equipment supplier, the home health aid schedule. He knew those. But there was another one. It appeared once a month, consistent as rent. A round number, transferred to an account listed only as a routing number, no name attached. He scrolled back further, going past the 90-day default view by requesting a longer statement. 6 months? 8 months? 14 months? It was always there. Same amount. Same day of each month. Give or take a day or two. He stared at the number. He took 4 screenshots, overlapping them slightly so the dates and the routing number were captured across all of them. He checked each screenshot to make sure they were legible. Then he locked his phone, started the car, and drove home. His hands didn't shake. They hadn't shaken once since last night, and he noticed that now, not with relief exactly, but with the quiet recognition of a man who has found a use for his own steadiness. He called Preston after 9 o'clock, once Adrienne's light had been off for half an hour. He stood in the backyard to make the call, phone to his ear, hands in his jacket pockets. The night air was cool and sharp. The neighborhood was quiet. Preston picked up on the 3rd ring. "Theo, haven't heard from you in a minute." "I know. I'm sorry about that." He kept his voice even, relaxed. "You got a few minutes." "For you?" "Yeah. What's going on?" "I need some advice on something financial," Theo said. "Nothing urgent, but I'd rather talk it through with someone who knows what they're looking at." There was a brief pause. Preston knew him well enough to hear what wasn't being said. "How complicated are we talking?" Preston asked. "I don't know yet," Theo said. "That's part of the problem." Another pause. Shorter this time. "I don't want to do this on the phone," Preston said. "Can you come to me? I've got Thursday morning open." "Thursday works. You good, man? Honestly?" "Yeah," Theo said. "I'm fine." He wasn't sure if that was true, but it wasn't a lie he felt bad about. They confirmed the time and hung up. Theo stood in the yard for another minute, breathing the cool air. Then he went inside, sat at the kitchen table, and added the bank screenshots to the private notes file alongside the photographs from the night before. He looked at what he had so far. Then he opened his calendar and typed in Thursday's appointment. "Doctor," he wrote. Nothing else. He showed it to no one. He didn't need to. Adrienne would see it if she checked. But she wouldn't check, because she never did. Because it had never mattered to her what he did with his days, as long as he was there when she needed him. That, he thought, was something she had miscalculated. Preston's office was on the 4th floor of a brick building downtown, one of those older ones with tall windows and heavy doors that swung too slowly. The waiting area smelled like coffee and old paper. A woman at the front desk nodded Theo through without asking his name. Preston was standing behind his desk when Theo came in. He was a broad-shouldered man with close-cut hair and the kind of face that didn't give much away in professional settings. A skill, Theo had always suspected, that he had practiced deliberately over the years. They shook hands. Not the loose, casual kind. The kind that meant, "I'm paying attention." "Sit down," Preston said. Theo sat. He pulled out his phone and slid it across the desk without preamble. The bank screenshots already pulled up. Preston looked at them without speaking. He scrolled through each one slowly, then went back to the first. "How long has this account been active?" he asked. "At least 14 months that I can see on the app." "Probably longer." "I didn't dig further than that yet." "Same amount every month?" "Almost exactly. Give or take $20. Preston set the phone down and looked at Theo. "What's the routing number trace?" "I don't have the name behind it. That's why I'm here." Preston nodded slowly. "Okay." He folded his hands on the desk. "What else?" Theo hesitated for only a second. Then he reached into the folder he'd carried in and slid a printed sheet across. Timestamps and a typed summary of what he'd photographed from Adrienne's second phone. He hadn't brought the photos themselves to this meeting. Not yet. He needed to know how far Preston was in before he handed over everything. Preston read through the summary. His expression didn't change. When he finished, he placed the sheet down carefully, the way a man places something down when he's working to keep his reaction private. "You photographed the messages?" "Yes." "And the phone is still in the house?" "As far as I know. I put it back exactly where I found it." Preston was quiet for a moment. He turned in his chair and reached for a filing cabinet behind him. He opened it and thumbed through a row of folders with practiced ease until he found what he was looking for. He pulled out a manila folder, thick with paper, and set it on the desk between them. "You sent me these 3 years ago," Preston said, "when the trust was set up. I wasn't handling it. You were using that family lawyer, the one Naomi found. But you emailed me the paperwork anyway and asked if it looked right." He paused. "I said it was standard. I remember. I shouldn't have said that. I skimmed it." He opened the folder. "I'm not skimming it now." They went through it together, page by page. Theo had signed a management authority clause he barely remembered. 10 pages into a document he'd reviewed while running on 4 hours of sleep in a hospital waiting room. The clause gave Naomi full disbursement rights over the trust's liquid holdings, with no requirement for dual approval on withdrawals under a specified amount. The amount written into that clause was high enough to cover the monthly transfers Theo had found. And then some. She wrote herself a door, Preston said quietly. And you signed it. Theo said nothing. Preston continued working through the documents. He cross-referenced the disbursement authority against the billing records Theo had noted. Felix Granger's sessions, billed monthly through a separate invoice line labeled Specialized Therapeutic Services, at a rate nearly double his standard fee. Preston pulled up something on his computer, typed for a moment, then turned the screen so Theo could see. Felix Granger's licensed billing rate, filed with the State Therapy Board, publicly available. The number on the trust statements was 60% higher. The standard sessions are filed correctly, Preston said. Those match. But this secondary line, he tapped the screen, that's not a real billing category. There's no corresponding treatment code. It's a fabricated service line, and the money goes somewhere other than his primary practice account. Theo looked at the numbers. He let himself sit with that for a moment. Not with anger, exactly, with the specific feeling of watching a structure reveal its cracks, one load point at a time. How bad is it? He asked. Naomi's exposure is significant. Breach of fiduciary duty, at minimum. If we can show intent, that she knew the disbursements weren't authorized uses of the trust, that climbs toward fraud. Preston leaned back. Felix is potentially liable too. Billing fraud, falsified records. But intent is everything here, Theo. Right now, what we have is suggestive. A good defense lawyer bends suggestive into coincidence. What do I need? Preston looked at him directly. Adrienne, if her physical condition is not what she's represented, if she has been concealing recovery, that changes everything. It reframes every dollar Naomi moved, every fake billing line Felix submitted. It makes the intent undeniable. He paused. Can you prove it? Theo thought of the moment at the bed frame. The slow, deliberate grip. The way she'd gone limp again the second she heard his footstep in the hall. Not yet, he said. Preston nodded. Then that's your next step. He drove home the long way, through the older neighborhoods with the wide streets and the oak trees that still held most of their leaves. He kept both hands on the wheel and let his mind work quietly, the way it always had when he was solving something, turning the problem over slowly, looking for the angle that opened it up. He needed Adrienne to move without thinking, without performing. He needed a situation where her instinct would override her discipline, something that felt real enough, urgent enough, that her body would respond before her mind caught up to remind her what she was supposed to be. By the time he turned onto their street, the shape of it was beginning to form. Theo made dinner that evening the same way he always did, quietly, methodically. He set Adrienne's plate on the tray beside her chair and pulled his own chair up across from her without ceremony. She was watching something on her tablet, earbuds in one ear, the other side open. She glanced up when he sat down. A small acknowledgement, nothing more. He waited until she'd eaten half her food. Something came up today, he said, while I was out. She looked up again, fully this time. My old firm, Hargrove and Associates. Apparently, there's a senior position opening up and someone over there mentioned my name. He kept his voice even, slightly uncertain. He wanted to sound like a man who wasn't sure how he felt about it. They want to set up a call, maybe an interview. Adrienne was quiet for a moment. Her expression shifted, not dramatically, just a subtle tightening around her eyes. The kind of shift that lasted only a second before she replaced it with something softer. Theo, she said. The word came out careful, measured. The voice she used when she wanted to seem supportive while steering. That's a lot. I mean, you'd have to think about logistics. I know. We'd have to find someone to cover your hours here. Full-time. That's not easy to arrange. Your hours here. Not care for me. Not help with things. Just hours. Like he was a shift worker she'd been scheduling. I know, he said again. She studied him for a moment. Then she smiled. The warm version, the one that had once meant something to him. I just don't want you to rush into anything. We should think it through. Sure, he said. I'll think it through. He cleared the plates after dinner and said nothing else about it. The next morning, while Adrienne was with Felix for her session, Theo spent 40 minutes positioning a small camera on the bookshelf in the home office. It was barely larger than a matchbox. He had ordered it 6 days ago, before he'd even fully formed the plan, because some part of his mind had already been moving toward this. When Adrienne asked about the small device later that afternoon, he told her it was part of a security upgrade. Packages had gone missing on their block. The neighbors 2 doors down had mentioned it at the mailbox. All of it true. None of it the reason. She accepted it without much interest. He gave her 1 more day to forget it was there. The following afternoon, Theo came into the home office where Adrienne was parked near the desk and told her he needed his old certification folder, the one with his structural engineering licenses and renewal records, before his call with Hargrove the next morning. It's up there, he said, gesturing toward the high shelf on the far side of the bookcase. The gray folder, second from the left. I'd grab it now, but I've got Preston on the line in about 2 minutes. He held up his phone. You mind waiting in here? In case I lose track of it later? Sure, she said. He stepped into the hallway, put his phone to his ear, and walked toward the kitchen. Slowly, making just enough noise with his footsteps to be heard. Then less, then nothing. He stood in the kitchen and counted. He did not look back. He counted to 60, then walked back toward the office with a normal, unhurried stride. When he came through the doorway, Adrienne was seated in her chair with the gray folder resting across her lap. Her breathing was slightly elevated. Barely. Just enough. Her left hand was flat against her thigh, in the particular way she held herself when she was working to appear composed. Found it, she said. Easy, casual. Like she'd simply leaned over and picked it up from a low surface. Thanks, Theo said. He took the folder from her. He did not look at the shelf. He did not look at the camera. That night, after Adrienne was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and pulled up the camera's memory card. He watched the footage twice, the first time to confirm it, the second time to make himself understand it completely, so there was no room left for doubt. She had waited maybe 10 seconds after his footsteps faded. Then she had gripped the edge of the bookcase with both hands, pushed herself upright from the chair in one continuous motion, stood fully on both feet, and reached the high shelf without effort. She'd pulled the folder free, lowered herself back into the chair, and arranged herself, expression, posture, hands, back into the familiar performance. The whole thing had taken less than 20 seconds. Steady, practiced, unhurried, like she had done it many times before. Theo copied the file to his encrypted folder, ejected the card, and sat for a long moment with his hands flat on the table. Then he closed the laptop and went to bed. Ruth Calloway arrived the next morning at 8, the same as always, letting herself in through the side door with her key. Theo was finishing his coffee at the counter when she came in, unwinding her scarf and hanging it on the hook by the door. "Morning," she said. "Cold out." "Morning, Ruth." She washed her hands at the sink and glanced toward the hallway. "How's she doing? She have a rough night?" "Slept fine," Theo said. Ruth nodded, drying her hands. She was quiet for a moment in the way she sometimes was. Not uncomfortable, just thinking something through before she said it. "You know," she said, folding the towel over the oven handle, "some days she's, I don't know, stronger than I expect." She said it lightly, like an observation with no particular weight. Her grip, her upper body. "Good days, I suppose." She paused. "Does she have a lot of good days lately?" Theo set his mug down slowly. "What exactly have you noticed?" he asked. Ruth looked at him for a moment. Something shifted in her expression. A small, careful recalibration, like she was deciding how honest to be. "Let me finish getting her settled," she said. Then, maybe we talk outside. They sat on the back porch just after 10, when the morning had warmed enough to make it comfortable. Ruth had a mug of tea. Theo had nothing. He sat with his forearms on his knees and let her take her time. I didn't think it was my place, she started. She wrapped both hands around her mug and looked out at the yard. You know how it is. You come in, you do your job, you go home. You don't go stirring things up in somebody else's house. I understand that, Theo said. But, she paused, there have been things, small things, mostly, but consistent. She said the last word carefully, like she'd chosen it on purpose. Consistent is the part that stuck with me. Theo waited. Her grip, like I said. But not just that. The way she repositions herself sometimes when she thinks nobody's looking. The way she'll reach for something and stop herself halfway. Like she remembers. Ruth shook her head slowly. I've worked with people in recovery before. Long recoveries. And there's a difference between someone who can't do something and someone who won't. How long have you noticed it? Ruth looked down at her mug. Honestly? A year? Maybe a little more. A year. Theo kept his face still. Has it changed over time? He asked. Better or worse? Better, she said, without hesitation. Definitely better. She moves easier now than she did 8, 9 months ago. Her balance is better. She catches herself without thinking about it, which means it's automatic now. Muscle memory. She glanced at him sideways. That doesn't happen without someone working with her. Theo nodded slowly. Ruth, do you remember any appointments she had outside the house? In the last year and a half or so? Ruth thought about it. She turned the mug in her hands. There was one, she said. About, I want to say, 18 months back. Maybe a little more. She asked me to drive her. A small pause. She specifically asked me and not you. Said she didn't want you to fuss over it. A follow-up evaluation, she called it. Over at Meridian Rehabilitation. Theo's jaw tightened, just briefly. Meridian, you remember the name of the clinic? Only because I sat in that waiting room for 2 hours reading a magazine about houseplants. Ruth's mouth pressed into a flat line. I remember thinking it was a long time for a follow-up. And she never mentioned it to me. It wasn't really a question. Ruth heard that and answered it anyway. No, she said quietly. She told me not to. Said it was just routine, and she'd tell you about it later. She looked at him directly for the first time since they'd sat down. I assumed she had. Theo made the call from his car, parked 2 blocks from the house. He identified himself clearly. Theodore Whitfield, Adrian Whitfield's spouse, listed as an authorized contact on her original intake forms from 3 years prior. The woman on the phone at Meridian Rehabilitation was efficient and polite. She put him on hold twice. He sat and watched a sparrow land on someone's fence post, and then leave. When she came back, she told him the records could be released in accordance with his listed authorization. He asked her to read him the summary notes from the evaluation dated approximately 18 months ago. She did. Significant partial motor recovery of the lower extremities. Voluntary movement confirmed in both legs. Muscle strength assessed at functional range for assisted ambulation, and, with continued therapy, potential independent mobility over time. Patient counseled on expected trajectory. Theo wrote every word down in his notes app. Then the woman read him the attached therapy recommendation, signed by Felix Granger, physical therapist, dated 3 days after the evaluation. Given patient's complex adjustment profile and the established at-home care structure, recommendation is for continued full-time in-home caregiver support and maintenance of current therapy regimen. Continued full-time in-home caregiver support. Theo read that line back to himself twice after he hung up. Not transition toward independence. Not reassess caregiver reliance. Not prepare for increased self-sufficiency. Continued full-time in-home caregiver support. Felix had known. He had sat in this house, week after week, looking Theo in the eye. And he had known. He had put his name on a document recommending that Theo stay exactly where he was, doing exactly what he was doing, while carrying on an affair with the woman Theo spent every day keeping alive. It wasn't an omission. It wasn't someone looking the other way. It was a decision, made deliberately, maintained carefully, by both of them. Theo sat in the car for a long time. He added the clinic notes to his file and stared at the screen until the words stopped feeling sharp and started feeling like evidence. Then he drove back to the house. Ruth was in the kitchen when he came in. She took one look at his face and set down the dish she was drying. "What did you find?" she asked. He told her, briefly, plainly, without editorializing, the evaluation, the recovery notes, Felix's recommendation. All of it documented, all of it dated. Ruth was quiet through all of it. When he finished, her expression had gone very still. The particular stillness of someone containing something strong. "That man," she said, low and even, "sat at this kitchen table and drank coffee I made him." "Yes," Theo said. She set the dish towel down on the counter with a precise, controlled motion. "You tell me what you need from me," she said. "Dates, times, everything I saw. Whatever helps. I'll say every word of it to whoever needs to hear it." The call came on a Tuesday morning. Theo was washing dishes when his phone buzzed on the counter. He dried his hands before picking it up. The number was one he recognized, the main line for Harwick & Cole Structural Engineering, his former firm. He'd submitted the reinstatement inquiry 3 weeks ago, quietly, after Preston had suggested it. He'd told no one. He answered on the third ring. The conversation was short, professional. The offer was real. Senior structural engineer. A position in their Charlotte office. A salary that made the last 3 years feel even more like an open wound. The hiring manager said they'd need a confirmed start date within 2 months. "I understand," Theo said. "I'll confirm by end of week." He hung up and set the phone back on the counter. He stood there a moment, looking out the window at the backyard. The same yard he'd mowed 40-something times since he stopped being an engineer and became a caregiver. The same fence Ruth had sat beside when she told him what she'd seen. He picked up the phone again and added a note to his private file. "Harwick & Cole offer confirmed. Charlotte, 2-month window, accepted." Then he went back to washing dishes. He didn't tell Adrienne. Naomi arrived on Thursday. She didn't call ahead. She rarely did. She came through the front door with a tote bag over one shoulder and her usual energy, purposeful, slightly breathless, like she was always arriving from somewhere important. "I brought those papers I mentioned," she said, setting the tote on the kitchen table like she lived there. Theo was standing at the stove. "What papers?" "The updated trust documents." She pulled out a manila folder and opened it flat on the table, smoothing it with both palms. "I talked to the trust administrator. She agreed the current setup is outdated. This just streamlines everything. Gives me a cleaner authorization to manage disbursements without needing dual sign-offs every time. It's easier for everyone, Theo." She said his name the way she always did, like a period at the end of a sentence, like it was meant to close something down. He walked over and looked at the documents without touching them. Dense paragraphs, signature lines at the bottom. He noticed the authorization language was broader than what she was describing. Indefinite sole discretion was a phrase that appeared twice. "I'd like to read through it before I sign anything," he said. Naomi gave him the smile she used when she thought he was being difficult. Patient, slightly pitying. "It's standard language, Theo. The attorney drafted it. It just formalizes what's already been happening. Then it won't hurt to give me a day or two." A beat. Her smile stayed on, but something behind her eyes adjusted. "Of course," she said. "No rush." She left the folder on the table. After she left, Theo photographed every page. Then he sent the images to Preston with a single message. "New trust paperwork. Naomi wants me to sign. Preston's reply came 2 hours later. "Don't touch it. Call me tonight." They talked for 40 minutes. Preston's voice had the careful, measured quality it always carried when something had shifted from complicated to serious. He'd reviewed the language twice before calling back. "If you'd signed this," Preston said, "any claim against the trust would have had to go through Naomi as sole administrator. No dual oversight, no external audit trigger. The existing withdrawals would have been buried under the new authorization framework." A pause. She knew exactly what she was doing. "I know," Theo said. "This isn't someone trying to make things easier, Theo. This is someone trying to close a door before it gets kicked in." Theo was quiet for a moment. He was sitting in his car again. He'd made a habit of that. The car had become the one place in his life with no cameras, no Adrian, no performances required. "Are we ready?" he asked. He heard Preston exhale slowly. "Yes, we're ready." The file was complete. Preston had spent 2 weeks verifying each piece. The affair texts, time-stamped and photographed. The trust withdrawal records, 2 years of redirected funds, some into Naomi's business accounts, some into payment logs under Felix's therapy billing. The surveillance footage from the home office, clear and dated, showing Adrian standing and walking unassisted. The Meridian rehabilitation records, obtained through Theo's authorized access, documenting the recovery assessment and Felix's recommendation that directly contradicted it. And now Naomi's new paperwork, added to the pile as the clearest evidence of intent. "I'll set up the meeting," Theo said. He drove back inside. He sat at the kitchen table where Naomi had laid her documents flat and smoothed them with her palms, confident that he would simply sign. He looked at the empty space where the folder had been. Then he picked up his phone and called Naomi first, then Adrian's room. He told them both the same thing. He'd made a decision about the job offer and wanted to talk it through together, as a family. Saturday afternoon. Adrian sounded pleased. Naomi sounded relieved. He sent a separate message to Felix, asking if he could stop by Saturday before the session to discuss a schedule change for the coming weeks. Then he texted Preston. "Saturday. Come at 2. Tell them you're a friend." They were all seated by 2:15. Adrienne was in her wheelchair near the window, positioned where the afternoon light caught her best. She'd done her hair. She'd put on the blue cardigan she knew Theo liked. Small details, old habits. She was performing before anything had even started. Naomi sat at the dining table, her reading glasses pushed up on her head. A notepad in front of her like this was a business meeting, she'd called herself. She'd brought coffee. She'd offered some to Preston with the particular warmth she used on people she hadn't decided about yet. Felix sat near the hallway, slightly apart from the others, casual. One ankle crossed over his knee. He gave Theo an easy smile when he arrived, the kind of smile that assumed nothing was wrong because nothing was ever wrong for people like Felix. Preston sat beside Theo on the couch. He'd come in quietly, shaken hands with everyone, and said almost nothing since. He held a slim folder on his lap. Theo let the room settle. "Thanks for coming," he said. His voice was even. "Before we talk about the job offer, I have something I need to share with everyone first." He reached down beside the couch and picked up a manila envelope. He set it on the coffee table. "I'll go through this in order," he said. "It won't take long." Adrian's smile held. Naomi glanced at the envelope. Felix uncrossed his ankle. Theo opened the envelope and laid the first set of documents flat on the table. Printed photographs of text messages. Dated. Clear. "This is a second phone," he said. "Found in the couch cushions about 3 weeks ago. The contact is saved as FG, PT. He looked up briefly toward Felix, then back to the table. "The messages run for just over a year. They reference meeting here after I leave for groceries. They reference the settlement clearing." He placed 2 more pages beside the first. "I photographed every thread." Felix's jaw tightened. He said nothing. Adrian said, "Theo, I'm not finished." He set the next set of documents beside the phone images. bank statements, a full column of withdrawals highlighted in yellow. These are 2 years of outgoing transfers from the settlement trust. Some went into an account registered to Naomi's business. He didn't look at Naomi. Some went into a billing account under Felix's therapy practice, listed as specialized services. Neither matches any treatment plan I was ever given. Naomi set down her coffee cup. I want to be very clear that Adrian was aware of. She knew. Theo's voice didn't change. I know that too. Keep going and I'll show you why. Naomi's mouth closed. He placed the third item on the table. A printed still from the security footage, time-stamped. The image showed Adrian standing at the bookshelf in the home office, fully upright, one hand reaching toward a high shelf. This was taken 10 days ago, Theo said. The camera's been there for 2 weeks. I installed it under the premise of a home security upgrade. I told her it was for package theft. The room was very quiet. Adrian stared at the image. The color had drained from her face. And this, Theo said, placing the final set of papers down, is a medical reassessment from the Meridian Rehabilitation Clinic, 18 months ago. It documents significant partial recovery, mobility in the lower extremities, functional movement. Adrian attended this evaluation without telling me. He turned to Felix. Your signature is on the therapy notes from that same period. You recommended continuation of full-time at-home care, despite what the evaluation found. Felix stood up. I think I need to call my... You can call whoever you need to call, Preston said. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved. But the documentation I outlined in that folder has already been submitted to your professional licensing board and forwarded to my office's legal filing system. Sitting down won't change that. Neither will leaving. Felix sat back down. Slowly. Naomi pointed at Adrienne. She told me the arrangement was fine. She told me he wouldn't notice. I was managing money for a situation she described. You redirected funds from a care trust into your own failing business, Theo said. Preston has the transfer records. Every one of them. Naomi's voice disappeared somewhere between one word and the next. Then Adrienne started crying. It came on fast and soft, the way it always did when she needed it. Her shoulders dropped. Her chin dipped. She pressed 2 fingers to her lips. Theo. Her voice broke on his name just right. Whatever you think this looks like, I was scared. I've been scared for 3 years. I didn't know how to tell you about the assessment, because I didn't want to lose. She stopped, took a breath, looked at him with wet eyes. You're my husband. After everything we've been through together. You can't just... Do you remember? Theo said quietly. About a month ago, when you were on the phone with Naomi? She blinked. You said... And I'm going to say it exactly the way you said it. He's basically my servant at this point. He doesn't even ask anymore. He just does it. He let that sit for a moment. I was standing in the hallway with your prescription. I'd just driven to the pharmacy and back. Adrienne's tears kept falling, but something behind her eyes went very still. This isn't anger, Theo said. I need you to understand that. I'm not doing this because I'm angry. I stopped being angry a long time ago. He looked at her steadily. This is 3 years of patience. That's all it is. And it's spent. He picked up Preston's folder from the table and straightened the edges against his palm. I'm filing for divorce. Preston is pursuing legal action on the trust. He looked at Naomi, then at Felix. You'll both be hearing from his office. He stood up. By the door, where no one had noticed it sitting all afternoon, was a single packed bag. He picked it up by the handle. I'll send someone for the rest of my things, he told Adrienne. He opened the front door and walked out. Behind him, no one said a word. The divorce filing went in on a Thursday. Theo sat across from Preston in his office and signed his name in 4 places. His hand was steady. Preston notarized the pages, slid them into a courier envelope, and said he'd walk them over himself. You doing okay? Preston asked. Yeah, Theo said. And he meant it. That same afternoon, Preston submitted the fraud report to the state attorney's office, the trust withdrawal records, the forged billing statements, Naomi's business account transfers laid out in a clean timeline that left very little room for argument. The complaint to Felix's professional licensing board went in the same day, attached to the concealed medical reassessment and Felix's falsified therapy notes with his signature circled in red. Theo drove home to his apartment, a small, clean two-bedroom he'd rented the week before the meeting, and ate dinner at a table with no one else sitting at it. It was the quietest meal he'd had in 3 years. He didn't mind the quiet at all. The consequences didn't arrive all at once. They came the way structural failures do, one crack spreading to the next, each one making the others worse. Naomi was the first to feel it. The fraud investigation moved faster than she'd expected. Without the steady stream of diverted trust money propping up her cash flow, her business ran dry within 6 weeks. She closed the storefront. Then the investigators froze her remaining accounts pending the hearing. Her lawyer told her to prepare for civil liability at minimum, criminal charges at worst. She called Adrian twice a day for the first month. Then Adrian stopped picking up. Felix lost his license in the spring. The licensing board's review took 11 weeks. Ruth testified by written statement. The medical clinic provided its own records. Felix hired an attorney who tried to argue the falsified notes were clerical errors, documentation oversights, nothing more. The board disagreed. They revoked his license, issued a formal finding of professional misconduct, and referred the case to the State Insurance Fraud Unit for further review. Felix's practice closed. The sign came down from his office door on a Tuesday, and nobody put a new one up. Adrian's situation took longer to unravel, and it unraveled harder. The insurance fraud charges followed the divorce proceedings by about 2 months. The concealed recovery, documented clearly in the reassessment, confirmed by Ruth's testimony and the surveillance footage, was enough. Her attorney negotiated where he could, but the case wasn't complicated. She had received ongoing disability-based settlement payments for a condition she'd known for 18 months was partially resolved. The numbers were specific. The records were clear. The settlement trust was frozen pending the fraud determination. The divorce left her with none of Theo's income, none of his care, and none of the financial buffer Naomi had been quietly maintaining. The house, which had carried Theo's name on the mortgage, went into the proceedings too. Theo didn't watch any of it unfold up close. He got updates from Preston, read the relevant documents when they required his signature, and kept his attention pointed forward. He started work in the new city on the first Monday of April. The firm was mid-sized, focused on commercial infrastructure, bridges, load-bearing retrofits, the kind of structural analysis that required patience and precision. His old supervisor had put in a direct word. His first week back, he sat in a review meeting, looked at a set of blueprints spread across a wide table, and felt something settle back into place inside him that he hadn't realized was still missing. He ran on Saturday mornings. He called his mother on Sundays. He bought a road bike he'd been thinking about for years, and learned, slowly, that he still remembered how his legs worked when no one needed anything from them. Old colleagues reached out. A few became friends again. He had dinner with people who talked about things other than medication schedules and insurance forms. He slept without listening for a call from the next room. The months built on each other the way good months do. Quietly, without drama, each one slightly steadier than the last. 2 years after he walked out of that living room with one packed bag, Theo drove back through his old neighborhood on his way to a site meeting 40 minutes outside the city. It was a Thursday morning in October, the sky a flat, even gray, the trees just starting to let go of their leaves. He turned onto the old street without thinking about it much. It was the more direct route. The house looked smaller than he remembered. The front yard had gone a little rough. The window box Theo had installed the first summer of their marriage was still there, but empty now. He looked at it for the length of a stoplight. No tightness in his chest, No old pull of grief or anger rising up to meet him. Just a house on a street he used to live on, sitting there the way things do when you've moved past them. The light turned green. Theo drove. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.